Flycasting tools and how it is sucks. Okay, that's what we're going today to talk about, and I'm going to show you why your mind is preoccupied and where the core problems are lying. Because the teachings are usually, unfortunately, and my research shows that, only made to make the teacher look good and very rarely the student. But before we jump into that, let me read you a little comment I got on the use of a tool called PRFC Rattle Trigger from Dario here. So you can make yourself a picture. I don't know if you've tried the rattle trigger yet or not, but here's a comment. Today I tried for the first time my rattle trigger. It works very well. I started by using both anchor line and rattle trigger. After a while I tried casting, and now I'm able casting my all 90 feet line with less half of effort respect to all other technique that I know. I fly fishing for more than 40 years. It is incredible but simple. I have to admit that that is the way to go. I think that energy propagate by waves, therefore music. Thank you. Dario, thank you back. Mega happy for you, and to hear that, Dario, it's great news, and welcome you to the Coolcaster crew, my man. Let me read you a little piece of this here one more time again, because I stuttered a little bit. And now I am able casting my all 90-foot line with less half of effort respect to all other techniques that I know. What he means is that with the PRFC tools and techniques, you will find the true way of the effortless casting, but with a method. And you cannot find into that world at the current stage how the teachings are in flycasting, because they preoccupy your mind. They put a filter on your mind that starts, for example, with the dreaded short circuit, I call it, the dreaded short circuit of muscle memory and bad habits. A lot of people will tell you, teachers in the sport, you have developed bad habits. You have already bad muscle memory. And don't practice any further, because you only will increase your bad muscle memory. You will only deepen the neuronal pathways of doing it wrong all the time. That's why you need to come and take a lesson. And I show you the good habits. That is what casting instruction is suggesting. Yeah? And while doing so, this casting instruction uses a certain framework. And that framework is made out of analogies and teaching pictures that are used to explain why and how flycasting works. Yeah? And many of these pictures are from a time where the lion was the king of the animals and where left-handed people were beaten into right-handers. I told you that already. And they're also often childish and unreflected in some certain way, because they are made up by a person who has a great passion for the sport and wants to help you, but makes this analogy, this picture, out of his own view. I give you an example. The paintbrush analogy. Do you know the paintbrush analogy? That has been used, or is one where you say you put your paintbrush in water or in a liquidy stuff, yeah? And then you move it and you spritz the paint against the wall. And this is how flycasting works. Huh? And that gives you a mental picture, but if you look into how flycasting really works, it is nowhere near how a flycast feels compared to when you spritz paint with a paintbrush to the wall. Or the hammer analogy. You hold the fly rod like a hammer. How do you hold a hammer? And what do you do with the hammer? You execute brutal force with a hammer. So these analogies preoccupy your mind. They put a filter in your mind, and once your mind hears hammer, you think you have to hammer it. But you heard what Dario was saying. He's throwing 90 foot of line now with half or less the effort than before. And there's plenty of other analogies, like, for example, let the rod do the work. I hate that shit. I would stay away from that. Because for two reasons. One thing is, the rod will do nothing without input. You have to put the input in first that the rod can deliver an output. Without putting something in, that rod will do nothing. And the other reason is, this is here what you can't see yet, but these type of analogies, they are only geared towards making the teacher look good, because the teacher stands in front of you and say, here you see, watch my casting. You gotta let the rod do the work and everything becomes cool like me. But what does that help for your teacher? Can you make, and the point is, you cannot let the rod do the work. You have to make the rod do the work. That's a big difference. Or casting expressions like, you have to be smooth. If I hear stuff like that on YouTube casting instruction like that, I click away immediately, because you have to be smooth anyway. And that is a value of information that helps you nothing. But again, I give you, let me turn the mirror. You've got to be smooth here. Look how smooth I am. And I present my casting here to you, and you got to be smooth. Does that help you in your casting at all? For what does that help? You got to be smooth here. Look how I formed that loop. And there's another thing you hear a lot, and that is, it works for me. You can try it. And here's a big problem. Only because it works for you doesn't mean it works for me. Because flycasting is an individual vibrational affair. And when you hear these analogies again, pay attention on how many of them are indeed geared only towards to make the casting instructor look good, but to leave you in a kind of a vacuum where you don't actually know or can put that analogy, can you cross-transfer that knowledge from the paintbrush analogy or from the hammer or from whatever picture there is? Obviously not, otherwise we wouldn't have 99% of the people out there doing 99.9% what I explained to you in one of the last episodes there about catching yourself. It's all about catching yourself and about questioning and looking deeper into these analogies and also what that helps. Yeah? And every time you hear talk in casting instruction about feel or control, I recommend you let your alarm bells whistle, ring a ding dong, and start to ask questions. The questions you want to ask are about the hows, the whys, the whats, and the when. And these pictures and those analogies are always presented very eloquently and very entertaining and meant to be fun too, and meant to grab and catch your attention, and usually also for being admired for coming up with such an analogy. For example, you've got to keep it in the box. Where exactly is the box? Or here's another one. The railway tracks. In Flycasting instruction, the railway tracks. Never cross the railway track. Do you understand that railway track? And then when you practice with that railway track, have you found out that it only plays a metal that you can cross the railway track at one side and nothing will happen, and you cross it to the other side and then you will tangle them? And all these analogies, all this paintbrushing and railway tracking and whatever that is meant to help you, but it doesn't. Because it preoccupies your mind and it creates often more confusion than it creates clarity. And that is what you see in 99% of the casting out there, unfortunately. Because all these two-dimensional, and these pictures are usually also only two-dimensional, and all these pictures lead to that preoccupied mind and also to the frustration. Stuff like, you have to make a hard stop. Have you tried the rattle trigger with a hard stop? Do that. Because what you want to be able to, and that takes me back to the bad muscle memory, to the bad habits and the muscle memory threaded circuit, you must unlearn these analogies if you want to progress in your casting. And Dario's comment in the beginning shows that very clearly. He has done that for 40 years already. And I was the same. You have no idea how shocked I was when I found that out. And that preoccupied mind is left in a stage of consciousness where it thinks, oh, I want to be smooth too. I also want to be able to form such a cool, sexy loop there. But you're being told, don't get bad muscle memory and don't have bad habits. And the muscle memory leads to bad habits. And that preoccupies your mind in a way that you don't even want to go practice because you are afraid of doing it wrong. And you're also afraid of imprinting, muscle memorying bad habits even more, so that your casting gets even worse or stays the same shitty casting that it is. And that is actually the truth. And that makes you all not want to practice. And that is at the end of the day, if you look as deep as I do into that, only a justification for the casting instructor's job itself. Yeah? Because when you tell you, oh, don't do that, you get bad muscle memory. And come to me, I'll show you how you get a good muscle memory. Okay. But then it shows that once you neutralize yourself and free yourself from this whole conglomerate of teaching pictures, and you take them and leave them aside for a while and only use the facts and the validatable, is that a word? Only the stuff that you can verify or falsify with your own body and your own mind. And this is what the tools of the PRFC are geared towards. And you see what happens. Because my man Dario tried that, made the conscious decision to try this stuff after 40 years. And what is he suddenly seeing? After a while, I tried casting. After practicing with the fixed line and the rattle trigger, and after a while he could cast now all 90 foot, all lines at 90 foot with, what is he using here? With less half of effort respect to all other techniques that I know. People, you make your own decision. Once you jumped over the cliff and you are in free fall, trying the tools of the PRFC, you will realize how much more effective that stuff is, and also how much more fun it is to cast, and also how much less effort you need, really, when you're not hammering through the wall or spritzing paint on the wall. Seriously, casting doesn't work like that at all. And if you make the decision, and if you go out and practice with the tools, let me know how they worked for you, how you got on, because that is my greatest rewards. If I get compliments from Dario like that, brother, thank you very much for going through that learning process, and I really appreciate you. Keep us posted on how you get on. Keep playing, and also don't be afraid of tangling up. Tangling up should be processed in the learning, should be part, tangling up should be part of the learning process in casting from day one, is what we heard last week already from another PRFC learner. And I hope by making you aware of how much of that teaching shit out there is only geared to make the instructor look good, because it is footed on a single loop learning system and not on a, what we do here, triple loop learning system that includes your own reflection and evaluation. And that is what the tools of the PRFC are geared towards. As soon as the weather gets a little bit more pleasant, we go outside and I show you more tools that really get you beamed away and synchronized with the harmony of the universal code that is the vibration individual affair that a Flycast is. And
subscribe to the channel.
I like to thank you again for watching and tuning in. Please do not forget, we don't own the water owns us.